Hello. All right. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you for answering. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
My name is Marissa Christensen. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of the Los Angeles River. Welcome to the Frog Spot. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, but a few new ones. So just by a show of hands, who out here has been to the Frog Spot before? Excellent. And who has been to maybe another Friends of the Los Angeles River event before? Okay, good. Some friendly faces. So the Frog Spot and the program that you're seeing tonight is supported by our friends at REI and by our members. So many of you here today. If you're not a member and you dig what you hear tonight, we would really encourage you to sign up for our membership. It starts at $60 for a year and includes all sorts of fabulous benefits, including events like these and a couple of upcoming events that we have in October. So every October, every nonprofit on the face of the planet does their sort of gala event. And we have decided this year that there's so much to celebrate on the river and so many community members to celebrate with that we can't have just one event, we need two. So on October 7th, we're doing our gala. It's sort of an intimate event. It's going to be at Marsh Park. We're unveiling a statue of our founder, Lewis McAdams. How many of you know and love Lewis? Yes, thank you. And on October 14th, we are having a concert right here at the Frog Spot featuring Ozo Motley. And so we hope every single one of you joins us for that. Please be on the lookout for communication and details about that. So a little bit about us, for those of you who may not be as familiar. We are a river advocacy organization focused on restoring the ecological health and equitable public access to this river. We've been doing this for 30 years. We are very proud of the river movement that has now been built and kind of has its own momentum. But you know, with a movement and with momentum that's grown like this comes a lot of change, a lot of projects, a lot of different players, a lot of different interests. And so we formed this series, this Policy at the River series, in the hopes of being sort of your one-stop shop for understanding what's going on the river, for making sense of all the different players involved, and for hopefully learning where and how you can become active and engaged in shaping what happens on this river. We as an organization believe that this river is a cultural and historically significant resource for the community and should remain one. The ecological habitat that you're seeing here today is a result of the advocacy work not only from us but of so many of the advocates here in the audience. And we want to make sure that we are providing the information that you all need to have a voice in what is becoming a rapidly changing river. We believe that as more development interest comes to the river, as new projects come to the river, and as new money comes to the river's success, the most successful future for it, is by having people like you involved in it and being vocal in it. So we hope that tonight is a small step or a small piece of the puzzle that sort of helps you engage in this way. And to that end, I invite you to check out our website. It's FoLAR.org. We've recently published a river-adjacent development criteria that sort of outlines what FoLAR hopes to see from river-adjacent development. Clearly, development interest is sort of burgeoning all up and down this river, and what we want to make sure is that each of those developments benefits the community, benefits river ecology, and features an inclusive planning process. Just across the river here is the G2 parcel. You may have read in the papers recently that the city purchased it and released an RFP. It's a 40-acre piece of land that is sort of the subject of ecological restoration, wetland restoration, and actually tearing out the concrete and providing terracing and wildlife connectivity between that land and the river itself. We plan to be very integrally involved in that process and hope to see each and every one of you help to shape it and guide it as it goes. So that is enough from me. Our panelists are all now here. Hi, Mark. So I'm going to hand it off to Stephen Mejia. Stephen is our policy and advocacy manager. He has become a really sort of steadfast and important voice in this river. I rely on him to point me in the right direction and to tell me everything that I need to know to do my job, and then some. So Stephen, please tell us what we're here to learn about tonight.
Yeah, so Marissa did a wonderful job, I think, introducing kind of what our goals are for some of these events. I wanted to add a little bit to that is also there's, you guys probably saw this in the description, and I wrote the description of the program, and I meant it when I said that we attend conversations where the future of the river is being had not just in relation to ecology and public access, which of course are very important, but even things outside our expertise. And so, you know, like river adjacent development, like in terms of homelessness, there are things that are outside our expertise, but nevertheless very important to conversation of how this river fits into the future of Los Angeles. And so part of the hope of opening up these conversations were, you know, having some of those people that we have those discussions with. We had the last event was on biodiversity and ecology and what that means in an urban setting. You know, and had a great conversation about that, and I encourage you to go listen to it. We posted the recording for that whole event online, so you can actually listen to it yourself. And today we have the practitioners, right? Some of the agencies who can are really responsible for managing all those different aspects of the river and those future benefits that we're going to try to see. So these are the groups who are really trying to enable that vision, who are both in charge of protecting and making sure the infrastructure works for us from the state of where it's been, what we've inherited, and also how to move that forward. And so I want to take this moment to go ahead and let the panelists introduce themselves and their agencies, and then we're going to talk a little bit about their work. Just to give people context of the format today, I split this sort of in half. We want the first half, and this is just arbitrary, it doesn't mean we have to stick to this, but I want them to have a chance to sort of communicate what their priorities, what projects they're working on, to kind of give you some fuel or some interest in terms of what questions you might want to ask. And then the entire second half of the program, if not more, we'll spend just in dialogue with you, so you can have a chance to ask questions directly of them around specific projects, efforts, anything that you want to discuss. So without further ado, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Mark Stanley from the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. Our full name actually is the San Gabriel and Lower Los Angeles Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. And it got that name because of both the watersheds of the San Gabriel River in the lower half of the Los Angeles River. So when I talk about lower half, I'm talking about from just south of here, just south of the city of Los Angeles, from Vernon down to the city of Long Beach as it spills out into the ocean. So Rivers and Mountains Conservancy is actually a state agency. We're one of 10 conservancies across the state of California. You folks up here probably know Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy more than you know us. You know their JPA, which is MRCA. RMC, as we like to call ourselves, also has a JPA as well called the Watershed Conservation Authority, WCA. It kind of mirrors what the MRCA does as well. And the territory of the RMC goes all the way over to Palmdale. It goes west to Santa Clarita, so it includes San Gabriel Mountains, El National Monument, as we got a little bit of news on that today. Yeah. And then it goes all the way south through the city of Long Beach in Orange County. So actually 10 of the cities in Orange County is also within the area that RMC is concerned about and wants to enhance. Our major mission is low impact activities, habitat protection, and protection of our watershed. So we will fund projects anywhere from acquisition, planning, which is mostly the most difficult part for many of our communities to get funding for, all the way through to implementation. So we even fund construction as well. Our funding source is mostly state bond funds, and that goes back all the way back to the early 2000s when the RMC was formed itself. Our Joint Powers Authority, WCA, is working with us on the lower half of the LA River as well, and we help to manage the lower river working group in this revitalization plan. That's the master plan of the county, which I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more of. So the working group is 40 members strong. There's tremendous interest in the communities along the lower half of the river. I would say there are 17 meetings. 17 meetings? 16. 16 meetings. 17th meeting is coming up the first Thursday of September. We've had tremendous interest among community members. So it's not just the folks that are on the working group, which includes the cities along the lower half of the river and the tributaries as well. Am I taking too long, by the way?
You're okay. We'll talk about the projects in sort of the second round.
Okay, all right. So just, yeah, it includes 40 cities, a lot of interest among community members. We're doing tremendous outreach to everyone, and I'll cut it off there.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Sharp. I'm a senior civil engineer with the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Works. Our interest in the river is as the operator of the Los Angeles County Flood Control District. A lot of people get that kind of confused. We have you hear LA County and then the County Flood Control District. They're actually two separate agencies, but the Flood Control District is operated by my department. That comes in handy sometimes, but is mostly just confusing for everyone, but that's okay. Our role in the river is our two primary missions are for flood control or flood risk management and water conservation through groundwater recharge. Those two missions have been in place since the district was formed in 1915. I would say that those missions have been largely achieved. That in general, there's very little flooding and very greatly reduced flood risk throughout the county as a result of the vast amount of infrastructure that was put in over the last 100 years. At the same time, the era that infrastructure was put in during that time it was completely okay to pour rocket fuel in the ground. And so we have inherited a system that has limitations. And over the past about 20 years, our department has shifted focus and has devoted itself to watershed management. And that adds, in addition to our two primary missions, we added water quality, habitat, and public use recreation, kind of passive recreation to our list of missions, and have been implementing projects and want to continue to do that as we move forward. So with that, I'll just go ahead and pass it on. Thanks.
I'm going to stay seated with all of you because I've been standing all day. That being said, my name is Sarah Rascon, and I'm with MRCA, the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority. You heard from Mark earlier about the 10 conservancies throughout the state of California, which are state agencies governed through the CNRA, otherwise known as the California Natural Resources Agency. So again, being a public entity. And the MRCA is a joint powers agreement. I know you heard that word tossed around, a JPA. So basically we're governed through the Conejo Valley, the Rancho Simi Park District, Conejo Park District, and the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. So all of these three agencies are virtually our parent agencies. And MRCA was actually created in 1985, around the time FoLAR got started as well, when Lewis McAdams founded the organization. I do want to say thank you to the staff and Marissa for having us all here and bringing us here tonight. So that said, MRCA has been around for just over 30 years and has been doing work along the river. We actually did the first pocket park project, sorry, tongue twister, otherwise known as the Elysian Valley Gateway Park on Knox Street. So all of these little parks have been an impetus, including Marsh Park, Marsh 1, Marsh 2, Rattlesnake, the gates, the heron gates that you see, which is our uniform design. So MRCA is a robust agency who has done these different developments along the river. We have a planning and design team, we have a firefighter team, we have a ranger division, we have a lot of staff that do a lot of different things. And our mission is to preserve open space, and as Marissa also mentioned at the beginning, G2 is the newest addition to the MRCA family. So we received some money from the Wildlife Conservation Board, again a state board that trickled down some funding to acquire some land just across the way. So we're in an agreement with the city, we as an MRCA, to acquire a conservation easement and to get some public access really quickly. I'll then talk about projects more in depth, but that's a little bit about us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Nguyen. I'm a project manager for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I work for the Operations and Maintenance Branch. Our prime mission is to maintain the LA River and a lot of our dams across California, Nevada, and Arizona. Prime focus here in the LA River is a lot of the maintenance here. There's a lot of non-native vegetation that we like to take care of to increase the conveyance capacity in here. We're doing a lot of repairing tow, levee, wall along the river as well to give it more structural strength. I think that's it. I can go over the projects a little later. I'm going to pass it on right now.
Hi everyone, my name is Phil Serp. I'm a program manager with the Corps of Engineers, and so my primary focus area is the LA County drainage area, LACTA, which encompasses 5 dams, a debris basin, and 51 miles of levees and channels within the Los Angeles County drainage area. The Corps, as Eric mentioned, we are responsible for a total of 16 dams, a debris basin, and about 58 miles of levees and channels throughout Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada. So it's, although we are located in downtown Los Angeles, our offices are here in downtown, and, LA River is our backyard. We are spread pretty thin in terms of our resources and our personnel, so definitely we appreciate patience when it comes to dealing with the Corps. I know some of you, you probably have some questions for us. I think we're going to spend some time later, so I have some cards here. We recently developed a website where you can go to and look up any and all updates on ongoing construction, future maintenance activities within the river and other areas. You can also go to this website and send an email to the inbox, request to be added to our mailing list, so that when we do have information to share, whether it's a public meeting or a public notice for some work that may be upcoming, we can share that information with you in advance.
So thank you. I think it's really helpful. I think one of the things that a lot of us who spend time working on the river find is how complicated the governance structure around the river can get. How many different agencies have some responsibility or role. This is just a handful of some of the main agencies that are responsible for some of the work you are seeing or will see around the river, but there's several other trains going by right now, right? We don't have a representative from Metro or BNSF or Union Pacific. There's a rail, not just a rail right away, there's tower lines that run along our rivers. There's transportation infrastructure. There's any number of different things along the river that we have to, we have to consider, but in thinking about the sort of future of the river, we have to really think about how these things get incorporated and sort of navigating the agency's jurisdiction and oversight for those projects. I think you're catching just really a glimpse of that. And so my hope is later today, you'll see that there's probably been a survey passed around. One of the purposes of that survey is to get feedback from you on how well or poorly this went and what kind of information you would like to see in the future. Happy to get any sort of feedback, because ultimately I want this to be of service to all of us, both the community and the agencies. None of this is going to work unless we sort of have meaningful dialogue together. So in the spirit of that, I want to have each of them sort of tease out a specific project or something that's of high priority to your agency, something working on right now. Some things were already alluded to or referenced. I think I don't want to keep us from questions for too long, so if you can take maybe 3 or 4 minutes at most. So just talking about maybe some of near-term priorities, what that project may or may not be, and then potentially even some of the challenges. I think it was sort of underlined a little bit with the Army Corps. They appreciate patience, and I think for us to understand what your limitations are will be helpful in kind of structuring the conversation. So. Do you wanna, no, fair enough. So should we start? Does anyone want to volunteer? I mean, does anyone have? No. Okay, so I'm going to pick. This is what happens in the classroom. Is, you choose someone. So I'm going to say Sarah.
I'm the only female on the panel. I'm kidding. It's okay. I'm prepared. That's what that means.
You set the bar.
So MRCA undergoes many projects, and as Mark mentioned, due to our jurisdictions according to the conservancies is where we're more active. So I did want to know MRCA also does work in the tributaries up in the valley, so the Pacoima Wash, the Tahunga Wash, and a lot of these projects we work with the local community, the community nonprofits. So right now we're in conversations with Pacoima Beautiful to revitalize the Pacoima Wash and to potentially eventually purchase some land along that wash, which, a tributary is like an artery, right? I wouldn't be the same without my arms and legs, and the river is the core of it all. So the tributaries are a very essential part of this watershed. So that's one project we're working on that is solely in the planning phases, so nothing that has broken ground. And then you have something like Knox Park, which is a park that has been around over 20 years. And I've been hearing from the local council office and the community members that this park needs some TLC. So what can MRCA do? Luckily, there is Prop 1 funding, which was just appropriated by the state. And if there's a way we can incorporate some water aspects, we can get some funding to make some capital improvements to this park and make it more user-friendly to the community. So there are many components, working with the council office, putting together some community workshops and get started in those conversations. Fun fact, that park was actually done prior to the bike path. And we talk about multi-jurisdiction, the bike path is actually governed by LADOT. So to coordinate all of these different agencies, Army Corps, the county, MRCA, the city, it's not an easy task, not because we don't want it to be, but everything has bureaucracy. And there's a permitting process as well. So at Knox, Elysian Valley Gateway, you'll notice that the bike path is much higher than the park. That's why I mentioned that. So the grading is an issue, and we need to take into consideration trees that are mature. So that's one project that we're looking at changing a little bit and making some improvements with community input. And then you have G2, where today the announcement was made that the state is investing $20 million into purchasing this conservation easement. And there are 5 proposals, like Marissa mentioned, to do the design, remediation, so cleaning up the soil, and creating some public access on that side. I also want to mention, I passed out a long sheet. So this lists a lot of the projects we have done along the river, including up in the Northern Valley. So if you guys would be so kind to pass this along, I don't have very many. I can definitely get you one if you'd like. But a project that you might find of interest is the Taylor Yard Bridge. There is a bridge that will connect CD13, which is the district we're currently in, and CD1, that is coming very soon and very close to the frog spot. So that's going to be very cool and provide some access, because a lot of these streets don't provide access to the river, and this bridge is a city project, and they're working alongside MRCA to find a good place for it, although Bureau of Engineering already has some plans. So even the city has, many departments, I'm sure you know, and that's a little bit about our projects.
I will volunteer someone else.
Eric volunteered himself.
All right, so I'm just going to go over a little bit of our. It's a little bit small to see, but after this event is all over, you guys are all welcome to come up here and look at it to get a better geographical location of the river. So obviously, everybody knows that we just completed our non-native vegetation along with trash and debris removal in the 6A to 6B area. So we took about 12,000 cubic yards of non-native vegetation and a little bit over 4,000 cubic yards of trash and debris in this stretch alone. Right now we have our contractors that are out here daily that come out and maintain this area. So they are going out, they're cutting the non-native vegetation such as arundo, and they are spraying the re-sprouts so that it doesn't regrow. We're trying to manage the non-native vegetation from that to increase the conveyance capacity. Upcoming work that we have coming up sometime in September of this year is going to be north. It's going to be in the 2A. I don't know if you guys know the arbor reaches. You guys?
Use cross streets, it might help a little.
Okay. Well, you guys all can come up and look at them out later. I don't know the cross streets myself. So up in the 2A area, we have the upcoming work is we're going to be removing sediment, rhizome, root ball, non-native vegetation, some common native trees that are affecting the structural pieces of the river, and obviously a lot of trash and debris. So that work will commence sometime September this year through March of next year. Right. You know what? I actually skipped one. So we're currently having in the 4D area, which is north of Los Feliz Boulevard, we're doing the toe repair. So if you guys don't know what a toe is the bottom flat of where it touches the levee wall. So right there, it's been compromised over there, and we've been planning this project for a few years, and it started out in June, and we're estimating that it would be completed sometime October timeframe. That area also has a lot of HESCO barriers still. We took about 20 feet out, and the contractor will replace the barriers once the job is complete. Sometime in yes sir.
So just to be clear, you're talking about the part where the bike path is closed, just north of Los Feliz Boulevard? Where there's all that construction going on?
Yes.
Okay, and that's going to be, you reckon that's going to be done in October?
That's going to be done sometime in October. And everything right now for that repair is going great. It's going smooth so far. Expect sometime late 2018, around October timeframe. So all the work, most of the work that we do, it's during the let's say rain season, so that it's easier for us to go through, and most of the work we do is from October to March because of all the environmental considerations that we have during the summertime with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and all that. So going back to late 2018, we're going to be removing around 25,000 to 40,000 cubic yards of sediment, and that should really clear up that area over in 5C, which is just north of Fletcher. So is there anything you want to add?
I think we're getting cut off here. But we'll be happy to answer any questions as we go through that process. And maybe we can pass this around. You guys can come up after.
Yes, sir.
One question. You mentioned the 1916-18 Migratory Bird Treaty Act that protects all the species around here, the native, migratory, and all that. So, but you were conducting this the cleanup and removal of some bushes exactly during the nesting and hatching of many endangered species and migratory and threatened species. So it kind of doesn't make any sense. We're being considered to treaty act, but at the same time conducting all these cleanups during the season that nobody is supposed to be on that area. Are you aware?
We can probably get into this a little bit further as we move along in this program tonight, and we can talk offline as well, some of the details, but essentially, I mean, we did the removal of the non-native vegetation during the non-bird nesting season. And what we are doing now is routine maintenance to try to keep the regrowth or the runoff for resprouting. So it's no new removals of any kind of vegetation within the river. It's the management of the regrowth of the non-natives is what we're doing.
Just to, real quick, the nesting and hatching season is from March all the way to September, and even a little longer for endangered and threatened species. So you guys, that's exactly the time where you guys were conducting all this.
Our removal work was completed in March prior to the bird nesting season starting.
So I think there's definitely going to be opportunity for more dialogue. So hopefully, if we can get through the other agencies, we can have more of this kind of discussion, because I think that's a fair point.
All right. So I'll try to keep this short. We have 4 main projects that the flood control district is involved in. Most of them are planning level efforts. The first is we're working very closely with the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy on the Lower Los Angeles River Revitalization Plan. That's looking at the 19 miles of the LA River from the northern end of the city of Vernon down to the port at Long Beach, and really looking at all the different ways we can make improvements to the river while still keeping its flood control capacity as well. The second thing that's coming up relatively soon, by the end of the year, our department is going to have a working group established and begin developing an update to the 1996 LA River Master Plan. So that'll be for the entire 51 miles of the LA River, and that plan is expected to be complete by, I think, by January of 2020. So it's a little ways out, but it's a big effort to update that master plan. Another thing that we're working on is what's called the waste discharge requirement. It's a permit that we have with the Regional Water Quality Control Board to do maintenance of the soft bottom reaches of our flood conveyance channels of the streams in order to keep the vegetation at a level that allows the stormwater to be conveyed without impacting its flood conveyance capacity. Got to be careful with the technical terms on that, sorry. And then the thing that's going to be coming up a little bit further down the horizon is that our department's going to be looking at all of the tributaries to the LA River and to the other watersheds. The smaller tributaries like the Arroyo Seco have not had master planning done or watershed plans done to them. And so we want to do similar efforts like we're doing for the lower river and for the update to the master plan, and do that for the subwatersheds as well. That'll be rolled out over a number of years, and the various watersheds will be prioritized at that time. So pass this on to Mark. I think he has 102 projects, would you say?
We do have over 102 projects, but I'm not going to talk about them all. And they're not all along the LA River, so thankfully. But we do have a number of projects that are along the lower half of the LA River. Many of those have been completed. So a number of those projects are not completed by the RMC themselves. We kind of see, well, we don't kind of see ourselves that way. We get bond funding from the state of California, and we pass those funds along to the communities that are within our area. So there's a number of cities that are along the lower half of the LA River, including the tributary cities as well, like Bell Gardens, Downey, Compton, that we provide funding to through our agency. So we typically have a call for projects, and then they submit their projects to us. We try to fund everything that's submitted to us. So even if a project does not meet our guidelines or the criteria that we set, we try to work with those agencies to help them get the project in shape so we can provide funding to them, particularly if we see it as a benefit to the mission of the RMC. So funding that's not provided back into the communities themselves, if it's a more complicated project or it's a multi-jurisdictional project, or you have several easements across the property, that type of thing. If it's more complex, we will typically run that project through our Joint Powers Authority, which is the WCA, to help to get that effort implemented, so we can include all the agencies and work with all the different agencies to enhance whatever the community is looking for within area. As I mentioned, we have many different projects, not so much in Vernon, but if you start at Maywood, we have a riverfront park, which RMC helped to fund. There are several agencies, including Santa Monica Mountains, that was involved in that funding of that particular project, and there's actually a second half to it that's going to be funded as well. If you go just south of there in Cudahy, or if you go across the river into Bell Gardens, you'll find us providing funding to projects as well. You go Southgate, Southgate's got a big regional park that the RMC has provided funding to, will continue to provide funding to. That's at the confluence of the Rio Hondo. It was just south of the confluence of the Rio Hondo in the Los Angeles River. And if you go further down the way than there, we've got DeForest, which is currently under construction. It's above Del Amo. It's above Del Amo. And just south of Del Amo is a project that's actually been completed, which is called the Dominguez Gap, which DeForest will mirror. And as you continue down in Long Beach, there's additional projects. But I would think the main thing that I would like to tell you is that this working group for the lower half of the river, in conjunction with the county, Dan's department, we're working on how we can enhance the entire 19-mile corridor, and for that to be compatible with a lot of the effort that's taking place in the upper half of the river as well. So we are actually creating something along the whole 51 miles of the LA River. So both of the conservancies will be working together here very shortly and talking about projects that are going to enhance the entire 51 miles of the river and how they're going to complement one another in the upper half and the lower portion of the river as well. So.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think there's, everybody hear me? I'm not sure if this is. So I think we were itching to get onto the question section. So I think several projects were brought up, several efforts around both this area locally and the broader area. I wanted to open up to questions. So if anybody has a question, this is just, I'm just going to ask you to, if you can, I'm going to pass the mic over to you, please. I'm not sure what's up with this helicopter, but yeah, please feel free to ask any questions you like.
My name is Tom Peters, where I live in Glendale. I've always wondered how we come to not capture water in the LA River that could be used for golf courses and gray water, etc. I did read about the San Gabriel River. They have inflatable canvas bags up by Irwindale that they can use to play with the levels.
That's a great question, and we get that question a lot about the San Gabriel River being really set up and can capture up to, there's some years that we capture over 90% of the water that falls in the watershed tributary to our spreading grounds and our infrastructure that allows the water to go back into the ground. The good thing about the San Gabriel River watershed is that the geology over in that area allows the water to go down into a usable aquifer really, really efficiently. And that land was purchased prior to it being developed and has been used for that since, for many years. I don't know exactly when they were built. On the Los Angeles River, there are some areas that are very conducive to groundwater recharge as well, up in the Tujunga area and in the foothills, where there's plenty of, there's dams that hold the water and release it slowly into groundwater recharge basins in those areas. However, as you get further down, part of the reason this portion of the river is soft bottom is because there's an upwelling of groundwater right here. So the underlying geology doesn't allow the water to go down into the ground. And then as you get further down, and it's especially and it's actually everywhere from Vernon all the way down to Long Beach, I'll just give that a second. All the way from Vernon to Long Beach, there's underlying geology that prevents the water from going from the surface down into a usable aquifer. The water can physically get into the ground, but it's in a very shallow aquifer, and it's relatively polluted, and so that water isn't highly used.
We could still use the LA River for gray water purposes to
Yes.
irrigate.
Yes, so yeah, you're absolutely right on that, and that's something that our department is looking into. In the past, of course, we're searching for the most cost-effective method to get water for our local use. And about a third of our local water, or a third of the water use in Southern California comes from our groundwater aquifers. As we start pulling that water off and holding it and then using it, like you said, for kind of gray water purposes or for irrigation, that the cost per unit of water is much, much higher than it is to put it down into the ground. And so as water becomes more scarce and as the overall cost of water goes up, it becomes more viable to do those types of projects. So we're definitely looking into it, but it's kind of a next stage kind of thing. But good question, thank you.
And water is a very complicated subject. There are even water rights. And, as you heard, the river is multi-jurisdictional. And right now the city of LA has an initiative called One Water LA, where the city, its departments, LA Bureau of Sanitation, and the Department of Water and Power are looking at further integrating the intake and discharge of water. So this is a project that is in the works, and it would essentially reduce the water released from Tillman, which is the water that runs through the LA River. So it would reduce the amount of water released into the river, but now they need to study what would the impacts be on the habitat and birds and the water flow and so forth. So it's a great question, and it's something that I think a lot of folks are looking into. There's another project, the last one I'll mention, not related to any of us, but there's a water wheel project over at LA State Park that's basically proposing a giant water wheel that would capture water and use that water for irrigation at the LA State Historic Park, otherwise known as the Cornfields in Chinatown. And this woman is an artist behind the project and has water rights. So it's very complicated.
Alex, do you want to? I can try to get it to you.
I can raise my voice. What is the water quality right now, the LA River Flow Control Channel?
Do you want to take that?
Go ahead.
MRCA does a lot of the recreation along the river, and we manage through the Army Corps of Engineers, allows the MRCA to create this recreation zone open from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and our rangers oversee both the Elysian Valley and the Sepulveda Basin, which are open for recreation, which means kayaking, fishing, bird watching, you name it. So right now, the water in the LA River is not up to the quality to swim in, but you can have incidental contact, which means you're in a kayak and you can have some water splash on you and you're going to be fine. And all of the kayak tours typically provide fresh water to rinse yourself off with afterward. So incidental contact is fine, and there are a number of agencies and nonprofits that do consistent water testing, including the LA Bureau of Sanitation, the Council for Watershed Health, and Heal the Bay. And we all get those reports yearly, if not more often.
Those reports actually come out. The water quality testing is done every week. So Friends of Los Angeles River, I used to actually work with Heal the Bay. We partnered with Heal the Bay to try to do some of the water quality testing. If you guys have seen people on bikes, sometimes it's me, sometimes actually Catherine Pease is here. Catherine Pease actually from Heal the Bay helps run that water quality program, and I'll happy to defer to her. But some of the reports that we're seeing in terms of the water quality is that it's actually impacted. It's heavily polluted for some contaminants, depending on the time of day, depending on the time of year, depending on the time of season. And it depends on what risk we're evaluating for. I think they've done a really great job, at least in terms of trying to protect public health, of putting up a website that actually grades and tells you how the water quality is actually measured and for what reason. And again, I don't want to describe her program for her. Catherine, you're more than welcome to talk about it if you'd like to. I think something that was encouraging to me is sitting after these meetings, because I'm not sure if everyone remembers, about this time last year, there was a report that came out about the quality of the river, and every almost news outlet picked it up as there's sewage horrible, you know, going into the LA River is the same as like wading into a toxic dump, basically. And while that was essentially a bit exaggerated, because the truth is the water quality hasn't changed that much from the time that actually article was written, even beforehand. What changed was our understanding of what the incidence of pollution is on a day-to-day basis, and probably more importantly is what are we or not telling the public about how to stay safe around the river. What is a recreation 2 versus a recreation 1 standard? Swimming involves contact with the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, you know, the orifices of the body that are vulnerable to infection versus, you know, a place where you can necessarily go wading. Health risk is also very difficult to blanketly sort of evaluate. Everyone has a different level of health risk. And so I think that that's where the best tool that we found is actually more information, because before we can start saying it's, you know, contaminated sewage or it's absolutely clean, is we need to understand what the science is behind it, and then B, what the regulations say in terms of how are we protecting public health. And as Sarah mentioned, one of those elements, at least certainly from our perspective, FoLAR perspective, has to be in public notification, has to be getting that information out to the public. So I'm happy to take follow-ups or let Catherine speak more on that.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention, you constantly see water flowing through the river because of the Tillman water plant up north, and that is recycled water, just a grade below drinking water. So it goes to show how clean the water flowing is up until it picks up debris and waste and urban runoff, E. coli, you know, sometimes from birds and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Pass this along. Let's all this hand first.
I'm interested in knowing if the studies being done on the water quality, if anyone's looking at what the runoff from streets is adding to the pollution, because they're, with automobiles and whatever on those streets, there are pollutants that might not normally be in a watershed or river, but will be there and can spike if there is an unusual amount of traffic plus an unusual amount of rain. And so are you looking, I mean, at what is happening with the roads?
I'll answer really quickly. I'll answer really quickly and then hand off to Dan. So the recreation zone is actually closed for 3 days after a rain because of the urban runoff. Now, for the exact amount of runoff and per location, I wouldn't say that there are, I don't know of studies available per location and per site, because that is an extremely specific and detailed factor. However, I will say that MRCA has placed a lot of pocket parks along the river, and we've done 3 street end projects which will naturally infiltrate water and allow for cleaner water after they go through, you know, rocks or a bioswale to the river. So there are some mitigation efforts being done, but I can't say we've specifically studied sites.
So the Regional Water Quality Control Board establishes what they call a total maximum daily load for each pollutant that's identified within a water body. And in order to meet those requirements, our department is working cooperatively with numerous other agencies, mostly cities that are responsible for the land use within their city, and that includes street runoff and, you know, anything else that's coming off of the land that's surrounding that's flowing into the river. For the most recent implementation effort, there's groups that are working together. Groups of cities are kind of interconnected, and they're all working cooperatively to identify which of the drains that outlet into, pick the Arroyo Seco or the LA River, for instance. They're trying to find what are the ones that are the most offending, and tackle those first. So in that way, yes, there is a priority being established, and those projects are being implemented, and those are going to be done over the next I would say, next 4 to 5 years for that first round. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of detail about exactly which pollutants they're targeting and exactly when it's happening, but that, in general, that's kind of the effort that's being undertaken.
So I want to add to that as well. That's not, because I think what the question was is about specific, storm drains. What is the impact directly from the streets? And I think there's water quality monitoring that's done broadly for waterways. So thinking about tributaries, but there are sometimes you have several municipalities discharging into one waterway from the street. And I think from my understanding, and I know Catherine Against Programs looks into this as well, it's something we looked into. I don't think there is storm drain specific, looking at which street end, which storm drain is actually contributing how much, to what extent. That level of that resolution monitoring, I don't believe actually exists.
So we have done that. It's not for every single storm, but there was a program that was completed that did identify the drains that have the most likelihood of causing those exceedances. So,
but it's not an ongoing monitoring
no,
program.
Correct.
It was a study to look at what are the most likely storm drains that are problematic.
That is correct. It's not an ongoing real-time type thing. You're right.
So we don't. Yeah. So that's very, I think, different. Any other?
Hi, I'm Angela Sanchez. I'm from Highland Park. And in the past 5 years, I've seen my community shift a lot. I want to ask the panel in general, how do you anticipate river revitalization, which will increase property value around the immediate area, overall hastening gentrification and even leading to further community displacement?
So that is an issue that comes out quite frequently through the working group for the lower half of the river. We've watched, some of that activity starting to take place. Of course, whenever you're looking to enhance, particularly a corridor as rich as the Los Angeles River, you're going to get folks who are going to be more interested in coming in, and it's going to create some demand. So that is one of the things that we talk about quite frequently through our working group for the lower half of the river. We have had special sessions just on gentrification issues, displacement of those community members that are there and exist, along the lower half of the LA River. And we're going to continue to have those conversations because there needs to be a balance that takes place. We want to benefit the people who are currently along the river. We don't want them to have to move to some other location because other folks are coming in and speculating on their land. But we also understand that the cities along the river also would like to see some type of economic development as well. And that comes naturally with any municipality, is that they're looking for ways to enhance their communities through economic development, because that's one of the ways that you would do that. But if that economic development comes in, we want that economic development to benefit the folks that are there, not bring in a number of new people, but find a way that we can benefit those communities. So one of the most recent things that's coming up in our conversations is this whole fact of governance along the entire river. Because there might, we're talking about whether there needs to be some type of overlay that protects community members and businesses that are along the river themselves. And we're going to continue that conversation before we move forward with any implementation.
So I'm personally born and raised in Northeast LA and have a vested interest and have served the community in various capacities. And that being said, gentrification has been a big topic that a lot of people are talking about, and it has to do with affordable housing and the housing crisis and the lack of being able to purchase property now, especially if you're trying to purchase now. And that being said, as a park agency, we are taking into consideration, I think gentrification is an interesting word and it's a double-edged sword. But again, as a park agency, we believe in park equity and, giving the most underserved areas parks and open space. And virtually, the river is a 51-mile linear park and opportunity for open space. That shouldn't deter us, but again, as a park agency, looking at anti-displacement efforts, making sure that we are being active in the community, having these discussions and having community input and making sure that the community takes ownership of their park and open space and that they aren't displaced. One example I will give is MRCA did a project over at Compton Creek, and we did a local hire program where we hired from the local community and trained them and hired them, and that is their park, and you haven't seen any displacement efforts in that area. This area is different because of the location, the proximity to downtown LA. And again, as a park agency, we believe in open space and park equity and preservation of the few open spaces we have. I think this is a larger conversation that we do need to take to our elected officials. You know, some concepts that I've been thinking and coming up with are maybe pairing density and open space with affordable housing, requiring our developers to not only create housing, but also open space and create a link between those two different elements of living. So local hire, I think, is one big aspect, and like Mark mentioned, preserving the local businesses.
I would like to add a little bit to that, because I think it's, so Mark mentioned the Lower River Working Group, so that's essentially, in the same way, this is probably so much of a simplification, but in the same way that the City of LA has a revitalization plan for river-adjacent development next to the river, you know, the 12 or so cities that exist south of the City of Los Angeles who share space along the river don't have a similar broad planning effort, right? If you're a smaller municipality, you don't have the planning dollars the same way a large municipality does to create this broad effort. And so the working group that was created through legislation helps facilitate that by providing a conservancy and authority of the Conservancy and the County Flood Control District to basically take that coordinating burden and help them come up with a plan together. And as Mark mentioned, that's definitely, if anyone's familiar with Communities for a Better Environment or ECR Communities for Environmental Justice, they've been working around environmental justice issues around the lower gateway cities for decades. And one of the things that they looked at in terms of seeing how just announcing revitalization efforts in the city of Los Angeles, they call everything above them the upper river, which I think is interesting considering, you know, I wonder what the valley considers the upper river, we consider the upper river here. But they see these efforts and they see the potential displacement that exists, right? And one of the efforts that's ongoing through Lower Working Group is trying to, first of all, identify vulnerable communities. How vulnerable are they? Which ones are the actual places along the river that are most vulnerable? As well as look at what efforts are going on, because this issue of displacement and gentrification is not unique to here in it's not unique to us in LA, or California for that matter. And so one of the things that we've been doing is trying to, the working group members, the nonprofits, are trying to push to get more research from some of these other institutions or some of these other cities that can provide some examples of policies that can help curb that. One of the findings that we found through this kind of discussion and this effort has been that the sooner you put those policies in place, the sooner you have protections in place for vulnerable communities, the better you can mitigate that impact for them later on. So it's something that you have to really think about sort of preventing in the same way that we think about sort of medicine. The more prevention we have in place, the better the outcome. And obviously, it's not just there's a supply end of it of creating more housing, but there's also a way to prevent losing the culture and the communities that are there as well. So that's been encouraging to see that at least there are some policies and things in place that could be done. As Oda mentioned, this is a big bureaucracy that you work in. So getting 13 municipalities to agree on what is a land use ordinance along the river look like can be tricky because each of those 12 or 13 cities have different priorities. And so we're trying to push to get to that end. I think it's encouraging to at least be able to have that conversation because I don't think it's been sort of openly had in a planning effort sort of beforehand.
And be engaged with your local officials, be engaged at the most local level with the neighborhood council, because your voice matters, and to know your representative makes a big difference, and to be active in your community makes a big difference, and they will take it into consideration when there is a time for public comment.
Sir, then I'll give it to Carrie.
Hi, my name is Cindy Bloom and I live up in Shadow Hills. I don't know if you know where that is, but it's sort of almost in Sunland, Tahunga. It's in northeast San Fernando Valley. And Sarah, you said you were born and raised up in the northeast San Fernando Valley, so maybe you know where that is. But I was just wondering, do any of you all know where Haynes Canyon Creek is? Have you ever been to it? Well, it's a really neat little creek near our house, near Shadow Hills and Lakeview Terrace. And it's actually, I think it may be the only natural spring-fed creek in all of Los Angeles, either city or county. And it's in a mitigation area, which is under the purview, I believe, of LA County Department of Public Works, and E-Corps is a private contractor that goes out and clears out all the non-native vegetation and species. It's part of the Big Tahunga Creek, and it's within the Big Tahunga Wash, which is one of the tributaries to the LA River. So, and it looks like on the map it's one of the larger tributaries. So Sarah, this is probably a question more for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important are the tributaries to the LA River insofar as offering protections from development and infrastructure projects?
The tributaries are extremely important. Like I said, they provide the water that then goes into the main long watershed. I will say it's often difficult to identify funding for the tributaries. I don't exactly know why that is, to be honest with you, why there is not enough funding from the state and emphasis. We do try and seek out funding from, for instance, the Coastal Conservancy and make the argument that the water then goes out to the coast. But they are just as important as the LA River, but more often than not, to be honest with you, they're overlooked.
Yeah, so it's a 10. I mean, the tributaries are essential to the whole system, and you know, I know that there's numerous projects that are planned and that have been done along the tributaries. There's an alternative stream that was developed along Tahunga Wash. That was one of the early projects the Flood Control District put in and cooperated with MRCA on. We have been doing planning on the Arroyo Seco for quite some time and have been stalled out due to some federal funding issues, but that's a story for another time. So the tributaries are definitely important. What we have started on is the main river corridors, and I think that makes sense. They are bigger and longer, and there's more opportunities, maybe some more opportunities there. And then as we're able to shift priority and move off of the main corridors, we'll be moving up into the tributaries. So that planning effort definitely will be happening.
Okay, hi. My name is Carrie Sutkin, and I live here in Elysian Valley, and I'm on the Neighborhood Council, so I wanted to welcome you, and I have colleagues here also from the Neighborhood Council. You want to raise your hand for a minute? Elysian Valley's here, and we're excited to work with you. It's unusual that we don't have the city represented here, but I know that there's so many other agencies, so it's kind of good to hear you. I have a couple of questions, one on the pedestrian bridge. Sarah, is it funded?
It is funded, actually, and that is a city project with Bureau of Engineering. There's a little rest area here that is an MRCA project. You'll notice we do the dark green. That's kind of our signature color with the rest benches. And the bridge itself is funded through MTA from a lawsuit, actually. So that is how the city has the money, and now it's in the hands of Bureau of Engineering, who's coordinating with MRCA and G2.
So the construction and design?
$19 million is set.
Because there's a rumor that it's not funded, so that would be, it's always...
As of last week, it is.
Okay, but I have another question too, because it's nice to hear the lower river kind of stories, but here we are obviously right at ground zero. And while there was a revitalization plan, there is not a land use plan. And I think without a land use plan, we're just going to be stumbling over gentrification, displacement, enhanced infrastructure, financing district threats, and it's a little unnerving, you know, for people that live down here. Is the space really going to be preserved for local residents, or is there just some big redevelopment plan that we don't know about?
In terms of what we're doing, no, there's no.
But this isn't your territory, right?
Correct. So are you asking for
Right here.
here?
Right here.
Right
Okay.
here.
So I think in this case, MRCA.
Yes and no.
Sorry, I have to apologize.
Please.
Actually, I should have mentioned this from the beginning. I wasn't able to secure representation from the city. I had several confirmations, and then unfortunately, not. They were able to sort of follow through. So I think this is something that, if anything, we can ask maybe how the relationship between these organizations are coordinating. What have you heard? What they potentially be planning? But I think this is something that needs to be an ongoing conversation, and maybe hopefully we can take this recording and take these questions to the city to be able to come back and answer them.
I have heard from the city, and all of this area, as you can tell, was formerly industrial and commercial. You can see that just from being here. And there is a new development, the only newest development that was actually in the works for, I believe, about 10 years. And it took them a while to finally finish the condos you see on this side because they had ran out of funding, but their permitting came from a long time ago. What I have heard from, and it's funny because this is one council office on this side, and that is another council office on the other side. So two complete different districts. And what I have heard is that this side of, which is CD13, Council District 13, they have put a moratorium in place to not have any development happen. That's what I have heard. I cannot speak for the city, but I do think that we, should preserve, all the space, if not most of it, that is riverfront space. And that's what a lot of our parks as MRCA have tried to do, to create public open access. The beaches are another example. You want as much coastal access as possible. The beach belongs to everyone, not just a few.
So I think, and to drive that a little bit further, there was this underlying question about land use policy, and so maybe
There is no moratorium. There's no moratorium.
There is no moratorium?
No. They're approving open space zone changes here.
That's beyond us as a park agency. That would be the local council office. Dan?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's some important issues that we are talking about policy, and there are certain jurisdictions that you have authority over your role as your agency. So land use jurisdiction with regard to anti-displacement or community stabilization policies, that is exclusively within the rights and the responsibilities of each city adjacent to the river. And so that's something that is really important for my agency as a county agency is that we don't control what those cities do. And it's important they have that authority, and we'll provide tools for them on the lower river that would obviously be applicable to pretty much any city. But it's ultimately up to them to choose to implement that. That's their right, their responsibility, and they're elected by their local local constituency. And so I don't think any of us up here really can speak much more to that.
Hi everybody, I'm Arturo Gomez, President of the Elysian Valley Riverside Neighborhood Council. And just to invite you all to our next meeting, we meet every second Wednesday of the month at Doris Place Elementary School, so that would be the 13th of September. But my question is kind of centered around homelessness within the LA River, and the fact that we do have quite a good amount of individuals within the river who have nowhere else to live, so they kind of open up tents and live there. And my concern is, how will we address this issue in a way that provides adequate shelter and housing for them instead of pushing them out, because that's usually kind of the approach the local government takes. And I wanted to know how all these special districts will work to at least ensure that there's some sort of cooperation within local government that will help them find somewhere to live. That's my concern.
So the Corps of Engineers, you guys are taking this question? No? Oh, okay. That's a great question. I'll go ahead and give it a shot here. What we have discussed this at length in the development of the Lower LA River Revitalization Plan. It is so clear that the issue of homelessness is an epidemic that is regional and national, and the solution to that does not lie along the river. The problem is not because they are on the river. Their encampments are throughout the county, throughout the city, and I think I do agree that just pushing people out is not the right answer. But at the same time, if there are encampments and people that are living along the river are making it so that others who also have the right to recreate there and use it, if those rights are being infringed on, then there's some cleanup and there's some relocation that may need to occur. That needs to be done in a just and caring way, and with an effort to identify services that they can access, and that's the approach that our department takes, and we try to have a very gentle hand in that. I think it's a really, really tough question, and I think with our planning effort on the lower river, not to push the conversation off or not take on that problem, but to identify that our role as river agencies our role in that is limited, and so we're really looking to other regional agencies that are looking at that problem more holistically.
What about safety, though?
And I did want to touch on that point really quickly. I want to add, we have park rangers, we have a division of rangers, as I mentioned, and a lot of them, if not most of our rangers that are dedicated to certain portions of the river where our parks are, they know the names of the homeless folks and what their story is and what their deal is and where they reside. So a park ranger is way less intimidating than LA County Sheriff or LAPD, and a lot more personable because they're a park ranger, and LAPD is stretched thin, so are LA County Sheriffs. So our park rangers, the MRCA manages and oversees 70,000 plus acres of land. So, you can imagine how stretched thin our rangers are, but we see the river as a specific piece that requires specific attention, and safety is a concern, and we've heard that. But we don't have dedicated rangers to the river, so there is actually policy in the state legislature right now that's called the Ranger Bill, and this would dedicate river rangers, and it would be, personable, nice rangers who can oversee the bike path with LADOT's permission and the river. So right now that bill is in suspense, which means it's being held up. So this bill needs your guys' support. If this is something that is of interest to you, you can simply look up Appropriations Committee.
1374. No, the 1558, it is sponsored by Assembly Member Garcia. Christina Garcia.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
And that would be for the entire river. It's for both Santa Monica Mountains and RMC to conduct a study and report back to the legislature on whether the river would benefit from river rangers along the entire 51 mile of the river.
One more thing I want to, for LA County, I don't need a mic, it's okay. I do. For LA County, you all, the voters, majority if not all of you, passed Measure H and Measure HHH. So this is a city and a county bond for homelessness and would help in creating some safety and security. So again, for your electeds to hear from you where this money should go, it's a lot of money. If river safety is a concern to you, they need help in an advisory panel, however you can get involved in directing those funds to where you see significant, if the river is in that purview for you.
Hi, my name is Michael Galano from Echo Park. I'm with BioCitizen. We're an ecological summer school for students, and we spend a lot of time along the river up at the Sepulveda Dam, hoping someday we can get in and swim. I'm curious about the necessity of the concrete and the flooding and for the engineers to just, if that's something that's just a necessary evil, we know about the historical and the 100-year floods that come along. So just to be interested in hearing you guys speak to that.
You guys want to take this one?
Damn.
The purpose of the concrete, I guess, right?
The necessity and just like if that's a necessary evil that will just kind of be worked into the
Specifically
future
within
plans.
the Sepulveda Basin?
No, not specifically, just along the entirety of the river.
Yeah, portions of the river, some are soft bottom, some are concrete line. It has to do with conveyance capacity. Maybe it's that certain areas within the river are narrower, more narrow than other widespread areas that can that would not prevent the conveyance of the water from the point source down to the ocean. I don't know if I can answer that question. You want to take a little bit?
Yeah. So the reason the concrete is there is because it's very smooth. The water can flow quickly and it doesn't erode concrete. And when the river was put in, it was done in a way that was, like I mentioned, it was designed way back when the habitat and other services that the river provides were not highly valued. It was designed to, as efficiently as possible, take the water and get it out to the ocean. And we know that there's shortcomings from that now. So whether it will always be there, I think I think there's going to always need to be some element of infrastructure, some sort of engineering on the river. What we can do is find places where we can widen it and terrace it, and that's going to be a little bit limited. There's also things that we can do to the low flow channel, even if it is all the way concrete. That's the smaller channel at the center of the river, especially on the lower river. We have that. Up here, sometimes the water just spreads out across the entire bottom. But there are small changes that can be done to add a little bit of natural element to the river. But in the end, as you add more and more, as you add vegetation to the river, that causes the water to flow more slowly. When that happens, you need more. The river needs to be wider, and so as you make the river wider, you end up encroaching on the industrial, residential, and business uses that are, directly adjacent. And it's just the reality of living in LA and having a river that was so tightly confined back in a time when that wasn't really, the consequences of that weren't really thought of. So we're doing our best to do what we can, where we can, to identify places offline where you can maybe take that water, pull it off, and create habitat and really functional habitat, places where biodiversity can increase and water can go down in the ground. You can have interaction with it, but you still have the channel available for when we do have those big floods.
Yeah, there's been a shift in the culture and doing more multi-benefit projects, which wasn't the case many years ago when it was channelized. So that's a good sign that, we are looking at stormwater capture, recreation, and these, again, multi-benefit uses of the river.
Yeah, so and I want to add to that because I think this is actually, Dan and I sometimes argue about this, I think constantly.
Yeah. But it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a healthy dialogue, which is why I appreciate Dan being here. But I think, so there is the constraints and engineering for the constraints that we exist in. I think something that was really helpful that Dan pointed out is when you look at a hydrograph, how much water moves through our region, how quickly, it differs very, very much and it has very kind of particular qualities. It spikes very, very high in comparison to other areas. Essentially creates this flashing situation that creates the limitations that he's referring to. What I think on the other end, if you instead of thinking about what can I do with what I have, is how do I get to where we want to get to? Then you can start thinking about some other maybe tools, or sometimes maybe it's not an engineering solution, it's a policy about how we're developing along the river, how we developed along the river, and how do we expand on those sort of conveyance capacities, right? Because ultimately this is all driven by it's not just sort of blanket public safety. There's regulations and laws around that. There's federal regulation as well as local regulations, and some of those things were established for a certain reason. And I think it's FoLAR's perspective that there is a lot more opportunity there than we've looked at. And I think from my perspective, I have to acknowledge that the flood control district doesn't have, Dan particularly, doesn't have the ability as a public servant to advocate for, well, this is what we can do with public dollars and try something that could work or could be risky. Because they have to ensure that the public safety is there. However, if we see there's an opportunity that's not being looked at or not being put into enough resources, I feel it's our duty as community organizations or as community members to push our elected officials to give him the room to say, you know what, you need to actually let them study this, because ultimately the constraints that they're working with aren't sufficient for the kind of challenges that we're facing today in terms of the climate change, in terms of worse droughts and more extreme storms. We need to come up with better tools, and I think from my perspective, understanding the engineering constraints is important, and I think freeing those constraints is almost more important, more taxing to do, so that we can actually find those solutions. So I definitely appreciate the fact that there's some limitation in how much concrete we have to live with, but I think that if we think outside the box, there's actually a lot more opportunity there. So I'm gonna take it, I think a hand I haven't seen before over here, and then take it back over.
I don't even know. Oh, for the Army Corps, I was just wondering how long the barrels are gonna stay in Atwater?
Sorry, can you repeat the HESCO bastions? The sandbags.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's talking about the HESCO barriers that we placed up last year. Right now, our engineers are doing the modeling for a 25-year, 50-year, 100-year flood. And it just all depends on the work that we do inside the river, whether it be repairing the structural or vegetation removal, sediment removal, and all that. As we complete each project, the modeling engineers, they just remodel, they do the modeling for it, and they tell us, they recommend when and where we can take the HESCO barriers out. So we can't really tell you a good time frame, but we are, we have a big project coming up in 2018, which could lead to some barriers coming out. Some, or if not all. I hope that answers your question.
Down here. So I think we probably have time for only one more question.
Thank you. My name is Vanessa Wolf, and my question is for the Army Corps. I'm wondering.
No.
Sorry. Okay. Oh, and I don't want to do feedback though either. Okay. So, I'm wondering if anyone in the Army Corps of Engineers, if there's any kind of task force or anybody identifying dams that are potentially good options for removal and part of the effort to bring back native fish, especially the steelhead that used to be in the Los Angeles River. I know that's a tough question, but it's really a question for you.
It's not that tough. You're asking if that.
I'd like to know if it's happening, and then if it's not, I'm going to do something about it. So.
Good.
You're talking about the removal of a dam itself.
I'm talking about dams themselves.
That being studied here locally.
Not that I am aware of.
Ringe Dam.
Yeah.
What's that?
Ringe Dam.
Ringe.
Ringe. It's not here in LA River, but
Matilla Hawk.
in Malibu.
Ridge Dam.
Oh, that's not under core jurisdiction.
That's not under core
No.
jurisdiction. She said it's
Ridge?
Yeah.
Ringe.
Can you say it so
Ringe Dam in Malibu. So Army Corps put out a draft EIR recently.
Not something we're maintaining and under our responsibility in the operations branch, but nothing that we're currently
So nothing
at.
that you know about. So if it is
No.
happening, it hasn't made it to your department.
Correct.
Okay. And does anyone else know anything about that?
I know Army Corps is a massive agency and they can tell you.
Yeah.
Our department operates 14 major dams within the flood control district. The thing that is difficult with regard to fish passage, and that the dams provide a really key resource for water conservation. And so to remove those dams, you've got to balance all the different needs that our region faces, and restoring steelhead is definitely important. I think the ability to possibly create fish ladders or some sort of system to allow fish to move through the system, I think is maybe a little bit more realistic than completely removing those dams that provide such a vital resource for our water supply. So that's just something to keep in mind. But there are other barriers that definitely could be taken out. I know that there is not currently a comprehensive study to look at all of the removals though.
So unless there's one, I think I'm willing to push it just a little bit more for one more question. Anybody, so Alex and here, we've had a question before. Anybody else have a question before I hand it off to someone else who's already not asked a question? So Alex, do you want the mic?
Just a quick two comments.
Yeah.
One is residents, Elysian Valley residents are more worried and afraid of bicyclists riding, like if they, racing on the Tour of France or than homeless people, than less fortunate people. So that's one, that's our safety. The other one is toxic contaminants not always come from the outside, inside the river. Like in the case of Army Corps of Engineers, they're spraying Roundup to kill some of the weed or contain some of the weed, non-native species along the river. So that's bad. Roundup what it is, right? That's the worst thing in the whole planet. So not always contaminants or pollutants or toxic waste comes from the outside, but also within the inside.
You want to respond to that? So I think did you have what was your question?
I was gonna,
Sorry.
I was going to ask Army Corps of Engineers a question. You said that one of you said that the update of the master plan for the LA River is due out sometime in 2020. I live in the valley where the river begins, and I would like to know, is the valley going to be included in that 2020 new master plan?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be the entire 51 miles, all the way from Bell and Calabasas Creek down to the Port of Long Beach. So there's been so many different planning efforts that have gone on that are sort of disjointed. What the goal of the update to the LA River Master Plan is to take all of those, consolidate them, find out if there's anything that's inconsistent, and kind of fix that and create it into a single overarching plan. And so yeah, that will include everything.
Probably not in my lifetime.
Well, I certainly hope we make it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I know it's getting late. I'm surprised everybody is kind of still here. I see a little bit of a glazed eyes around everyone's look. So if you have any other questions, I think the house may be around for a few other questions. But if you could please join me in giving them applause for coming out and answering. I think one of the